Yeah, I am. Good morning. Hey, last day of the year, we're going to finish the year out in chapter 3 of Esther, verses 1 through 11. You know, this has been an interesting class. You know, we got 13 lessons here to cover 10 chapters. So that means, you know, each week we get about 5, 6, 8 verses. And then if you're like me, dumb as a box of rocks, trying to figure out how in the world am I going to be able to get 45 minutes out of this. An interesting thing about Esther is, you know, when you read this, there was a good bit of controversy if it was going to be part of the canon originally. You had a lot of people didn't think maybe it ought to even be in the Bible, you know, since the word God's not in there, temple's not in there, Mount anything, city of Jerusalem's not mentioned in there, there ain't any prayers in there. And you know, you look at the lesson and you look at the book, it seems like a story, does it not? Does it just seems like something that you'd go check out a book at the library and you just read it? I mean, it's that kind of thing. And you're looking for some earth-shattering theological thing there. It ain't in here. It's not in this book. It's not a romance either, is it? No. And it's we got a king here, Ahasuerus, and he's obviously wealthy, got obviously a big empire that he's over, got a lot of money, accessible to any woman that he obviously wants or desires or whatever. So do you get the impression that this is a Hugh Hefner maybe? He's kind of head of this empire, and he's kind of like a playboy kind of guy. We've already studied about how Vashti was deposed from her position. And today, we're going to introduce another character named Haman. And we have a king. Has he made any of these decisions? He always calls in the counselor, advisor, wise person. And he goes along with whatever they say. He doesn't question anything. Like they say, you need to kick Vashti to the curb and pick out this other woman over here. She's a little easier on the eyes, you know, and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, so he follows what their advice is. And in today's lesson, we got a guy who comes to him and says, man, you need to wipe these people out. Well, whatever you want to do, just go about it. Doesn't even ask who the people even are, if you notice. So here, this is the situation that's where we at with this guy. And then, too, if you do some research about Ahasuerus, you know the temple at this time is supposedly in a rebuild. At this time, Darius king has allowed them to go rebuild the temple, and Cyrus has allowed them to do this. But a lot of historians think that Ahasuerus put it to an end, stopped it. And there was a split, some turmoil come up that supposedly maybe made him make the decision, was the Samaritans wanted to help rebuild, but the Jews wouldn't let them. Because, you know, what is a Samaritan? Half and half. There's some of them Jews that got mixed up with the Gentiles when they all got kicked out of Egypt and they got together, and these are the offspring of these half Jews, half Gentiles, and so they're really not like by either one, you know. Somewhat like some of the situation going on in the Middle East today sounds like, even, doesn't it? Same thing. Well, that's the people. They wouldn't allow them to work. And then there's some reason possibly why they wouldn't let them work. Some say it's because they wanted to disturb the whole thing, because they had an ulterior motive not to let the temple get built. But then at the same time, they were playing like they liked the Jews. So, you know, even back then, those days, we had this sort of tumultuous relationship going between these parties. And I got to thinking, dangerous thing. Got thinking, would this not make a fantastic play? I mean, would this could be Act 1, Act 2, we could have 10 acts, because they've got 10 chapters. You could have an intermission like after 5, you know, and if I go get a Coke, and then you could come back and have the rest of this thing. I mean, it is a story that would make an ideal play. So I thought, let's look up and see if there's ever been a play. I'll be dead gum. This summer in Bronson, Missouri, they had a play, Esther, run an hour, 120 minutes. So instead of doing this, we'll get the movie, watch it for 120 minutes, and then we don't have to come back for Sunday school class. We'll get it all in 120 minutes. Raise your hand if you don't think that's a good idea. I mean, but is that not something that, you know, I just had this while I did, and I thought, I'll Google this and see. And I did again. In Brunson, Missouri, they did one this summer. And it had run 120 minutes and told who to play, and it was a success. I mean, people loved it. So that's the free commentary to start, since the lesson's only 10 verses. That's the free commentary to get us kind of going. Let's read. I'm going to read. Or if one of y'all just says, boy, I want to read that so bad, Ronnie, let me read. If one of y'all's got a craving just to do some reading, y'all can read the 11 verses, or I read it. Any volunteers want to read 11 verses? I'll read it. And I'll try at the words, these names. And after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman. For so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? Now it happened when they spoke to him daily, and he wouldn't listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's word would stand, for Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were out the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. And in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of Ahasuerus, King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it's not fitting for the king to let them remain. And if it please the king, let a decree be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. You know, we've talked a little bit briefly about Ahasuerus, and he reigned somewhere around 485 BC, sometime like that. And now we introduce this guy Haman. And Mel one night touched a little bit on it on Wednesday night, and I told him to leave it alone. And Randy danced around Haman a little bit last week and didn't really get into it much. But we've already, all of us have learned that there's some bad news here, that who Haman really could be. It seems that because Saul didn't wipe out the Amalekites and saved King Agag like he's supposed to, what happened to Agag? Samuel made mincemeat out of him. He made mincemeat. He cut him. He didn't kill him. He cut him into pieces. I mean, he did a real thorough job. And he didn't live but that day. You know, that didn't happen a week or two later. So that was, if you read that, it happened like that day. I mean, that afternoon almost. So Agag is cut in pieces. But he didn't kill all of the descendants of the Amalekites, did he? So this is Agag ancestry here. So there's some bad blood or something in this bloodline here that could possibly hate the Jews, right? There's some bad vibes going on in this family relationship. So we've gotten suddenly have Haman put in this position of authority. And the whole incident starts. Why? Because Mordecai, who we've been introduced to in Act 2 of the play, he has been introduced now as the uncle of Esther. So he's the object of all of the attention at this point, because he will not bow to Haman. So why will Haman not bow to it? And you can read in the first verse that they don't tell you nothing about why he don't. We're just not given any information. So what reason do we have available in our mind that Mordecai wouldn't do it? What do you think? You think their history? Well, let's look at it in this light. You know, I'm a Jackson. And I really can't remember anybody doing my family wrong 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. But Haman remembered it. I don't even know who any of my ancestors was. This is 500 years after Agag had been cut to pieces and the Jews had done it. Can we even remember back 500 years? But we can remember that the Indians was maybe mistreated and sent to a reservation out here 200 years ago or 150 years, or the blacks were discriminated against in slaves 150 years ago. Or the Civil War. Yeah. Those are 160. But do we know the specific details of what happened in our families 500 years ago? No, we don't know that. So to me, it lessens that argument a little bit, but not a lot, because, we're not given any other reason why he may have had some feelings. We don't know. Or are we? Throw this out here to you. And y'all think about this. Studied this way too long. All right. Throw this out and y'all think about it. Did Haman was he in cahoots with these eunuchs that was going to kill the king that we've just read about? And Mordecai told on him, right? Was there a conspiracy here? JFK, there's conspiracy there. So we know conspiracies You know, and how did Mordecai know this about the eunuchs? He overheard. You know what the Septuagint is, right? It's what the Greek Old Testament, basically. And you know, they have some things in it that we don't necessarily have in our version that we use, right? The answer is yes, it does. Nobody shook their hand yet, but it does, okay? All right, I'm going to read what's called Esther 1 in the Septuagint. Have y'all ever read this? Shake your head,
I mean, the Septuagint a little bit. I haven't read this.
This is the prologue to Esther 1, in my opinion. This is in the Septuagint, which is used by, the Old Greek, and the Catholic Church uses it. The names are Greek names, and I'm going to try to say them as we know them in our Bible. In the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes, which they call him Artaxerxes, the great king, on the first day of Nisan, Mordecai, the son of Jairus, son of Simeus, the son of Caius, the tribe of Benjamin, a Jew, dwelling in the city of Susa, a great man, serving in the king's palace, saw a vision. Now he was of the captivity which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried captive from Jerusalem with Jeconiah, the king of Judea. Now that pretty much agrees with what we read, just a little bit different wording. And this was his dream. Behold, voices and a noise, thunder, earthquake, tumult upon the whole earth. And behold, two great serpents came forth, both ready for conflict. And there came from them a great voice. And by their voice every nation was prepared for battle, even to fight against the nation of a just people. And behold, a day of darkness and blackness, tribulation, anguish, affliction, and tumult upon the earth. And all the righteous nation was troubled, fearing at their own afflictions, and they prepared to die, and cried to their God. And from their cry there came, as it were, a great river from a little fountain, even much water. And light and the sun arose, and the lowly were exalted, and devoured those honorable. And Mordecai, who had seen this vision and what God had desired to do, having awoke, kept it in his heart, and desired by all means to interpret it even till night. And Mordecai rested quiet in the palace with Gabbatha and Tarath, the king's two chambermaids, eunuchs who guarded the palace. And he heard their reasoning and searched out their plans, and learnt that they were preparing to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, and he informed the king concerning him. And the king examined these two chamberlains, and they confessed, and they were executed. And the king wrote these things for memorial. Also Mordecai wrote concerning these things. And the king commanded Mordecai to attend in the palace, and to give gifts for his service. And Haman, which is Haman, was honorable in the sight of the king, and he endeavored to hurt Mordecai and his people because of the two chamberlains of the king. Now that's the Greek interpretation. Now that makes it sound like Haman could have been in on this deal, doesn't it? A little bit. He sure did. Right. That's exactly what the church has done somewhat, is thrown the Septuagint translations out there. There's some references in this research here that you could go to Judith, which is another one of their Apocrypha books, and you can look at it, and it throws some light that there could have been some shadows of those eunuchs involved in Haman's discussions. Another thing to support it, and this is, I'm getting way ahead of where I was on my outline up here, because my outline's got like 20 points in it, and y'all are really messing me up because you got my mind going somewhere where I don't really need it, because I got that like item number 18, and we're really on 4, But anyway, because I'll come back, it's going to be hodgepodge putting this together anyway. So anyway, what I was saying, we have these incidences where all of this stuff happens, and it's so much history entwined with what was going on. Haman in here, Haman's trying to possibly overthrow the king too through these eunuch's actions, but he's going to throw them under the bus. And then it dawns on me, how in the world did Haman get 10,000 talents of silver? 75 pounds of it. That's $292 million if you went down to the guy on TV. Who's the guy that tries to sell me and you gold and silver all on the time on the TV, the movie star? I only trust in gold and silver because the American economy is going south. You know that guy that does that. So me and you could take this is 75 tons of silver. Now I put it in, I'm a construction guy. That's 3 triaxle dump truck loads because I get 25 tons of stone on a load. That is 3 dump truck loads of silver. Here is a guy who's just somebody named Haman who's done something pretty good, probably a warrior of some kind. It's got promoted to, I'm trying to figure out what position it is, and I'm sort of thinking I'd like the word chief of staff here.
It'd be kind of like Joseph.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. If you look at these stories, that's item number 27.
Oh, yeah.
Like you just, Joseph, see, that you look at these 2 stories here. Joseph was being tempted by Potiphar's wife, money, all of that, and then he gets slapped down, and then he gets raised up to a position, right? Same thing here. Here's Mordecai. He didn't get recognized for turning this, and he's just working the gates. I mean, he's a gatekeeper. He's at the gate. So I'm thinking he's like at the football game. He's working the gates. That would be his job. And then you got the chief of staff who's probably embezzled, probably hooked up with these guys that's trying to have the king killed, but he's like a good politician. He's put all the blame on them, and he's kept himself at arm's length from the transaction. So he's clean. So that's the scenario right there. And that's this little action that we got going on. So which sounds more logical to you? Playing like we all are logical, which that's another question. But play like we're logical. All right, we got one scenario. Boy, he's going to get a truckload of money if he's been stealing, but he might get caught. But now then he's got it laid off on these other guys. Or it's because they killed my great-great-great-great-great-grandpa 500 years ago. So which one of these seems to you the most likely? I don't think he even knows his great-great-grandpa. I think he saw 10,000 talents of silver that I've stolen, I've gotten, I may get caught, and I want to figure out a way. That's, to me, knowing that we're dealing with high caliber, quality, moral people here. We know that they had to have the slightest, it had to be a shyster thing going on. They're human, they're greedy men, right? So that's what they're doing. I want to believe that, oh yeah, but to support the old thing is, what's the way, how do we identify who Haman is? We tell you all of his kinfolks back here. We didn't start out by saying he's a great guy here on his own merit. We tied him back to his ancestry. So that supports the theory that he remembered the others. So y'all there's your choices.
Johnny, we don't really know for sure that even him being called the Agag guy, that is King Agag, actually. That's another. And one other little possibility, which has been thrown into the mix, I guess,
Right.
is that he was in that by reverence, which of course, I I revere people. We revere people. That word has a much broader meaning than worship, or it includes worship. But that he was being asked, that they were being asked to actually worship Haman, like in the story of Nebuchadnezzar. So,
Yeah.
while I'm got some
Yeah, and I'll tell you another little thing that we should have brought up last week, and I'd studied it the week before, or whenever we started, and I didn't say anything. I probably should have raised my hand. You remember the feast that we thought, boy, this book, we're having some parties. I mean, this is a party book. I mean, you know, if you want to read about parties, this guy can throw parties. And he liked having them for anything. But you remember what they drunk out of? The gold and silver thing? Where did they get that stuff? The temple. That's where they raided the stuff and gotten, when the Babylonians raided the temple, they're drinking out of the stuff that they've stolen from the Jews when they destroyed the temple. That's what they're drinking from. They're drinking from all of the vessels that they'd stolen that David had made for the temple. That's what they're drinking of that we read about the first and second chapters. So, you know, this whole story is intertwined with the old history and, you know, with the Jews and everything else. So, we have these two refusals here. We have Mordecai who refuses, and we had Vashti who refuses. It goes south for Vashti, but it's a thing of good for Mordecai. It turns out good. So we have two similar situations that we've already gotten to in the book, where the refusal to bow down and the refusal to submit has sort of made us a little in-house comparison there of the actions. And again, like we said before, both of these actions, the king lets happen whatever he wants to happen. And we got an item that, because of these issues, Vashti and this refusal to bow down, look at what it's done. This has caused a national crisis. Something as trivial as the Queen not coming to the party has been blown up into a national crisis. I mean, this is serious. I mean, it's going to tell, he's sending the Pony Express to all 127 provinces in their own language to get them guys to change these laws on women. Now then, Haman's cooked up the deal. We're going to do the same thing here because this guy didn't bow. We're going to punish the Jews. And because he did it as a single person, the whole nationality of Jews need to be wiped out because he didn't do it. So you have such trivial, what I would think would be a trivial thing here. We have blown this thing up into just ungodly things. And like in verse 5 it says, Haman was brought to wrath. I mean, that's one notch above. He's pretty mad at him, right? He is seeking bodily harm. Well, that's the same reaction that Ahasuerus had to Vashti, is it not? He was really mad. Really, really mad about these two items. You know, and what do we know about wrath in the New Testament and the Old Testament and everywhere? It seems like everybody who has wrath, it's going to be bad for them. It doesn't always enter. The whole story is wrath is not good. And you know, it's interesting too that did Haman see him not bowing?
Not at first.
We know he didn't at first because the guys had to come and tell him. So he didn't even know about it. He's acting sort of on gossip until he goes and checks it out for himself. And we don't really know for sure if he checked it out, but assuming that he did. And I underline this. You need to underline this in your books. Isn't that what Mel always tells us? You need to underline this. Mordecai disdained laying hands on, Haman disdained laying hands on Mordecai. Why did he just go out there and take care of him himself? Be done with this.
He has to position himself.
Yep. We don't know what it was, but we know he had a relationship. There was some form of a relationship between Mordecai and the king. So he didn't want to step out there just on his own and wipe him out. So that's what makes him devise his plan. And buddy, we're going to use the most scientific way in the world to pick the day. We're going to really do it right. We're going to roll the dice. You hear of battles being fought, and Bill's the one that reads every war book there ever was, even if it's an imaginary war. But, they know the weather and all this kind of stuff on the days they're going to attack. They've got it all figured out. Well, to get it straight here, we're going to roll the dice. And what did they use for dice? That's another thing. I was curious, because I know that the guys at Parker Brothers hadn't come up with those little dice just yet with the dots on them. So they had to have something. Sheep knuckles. Said most of them use sheep knuckles, and they put little marks on the sides of the knuckles. Some of them would just have twigs, different sized twigs, and they would just hold them at certain and drop them. And whichever twig was on top won. After that was a scientific way of doing this. And a lot of that, and Ahasuerus, since he's not a Jew, he's a Persian, which today would probably make him an Iranian. They really big into astrology, mythology, philosophy, and what religion did they follow? Ain't nobody raised their hand. Zoroaster, right? And you know what that is? That's where you don't really have a deity per se, but you have something called the Lord of Wisdom is what they call it. And it's something that's just good, but they believe in an afterlife. They did. There's still some of them today, by the way. They believe in heaven and hell, but the deity is this imaginary thing. And Zoroaster lived. There's possibly two Zoroasters. One could have lived in 2500 BC, and then there's one that was active in Persia around 700 to 800 BC, which starts to coincide with the time frame that we are right here, that he established Zoroasterism, and it was the predominant religion at this time among the Persians. So that's the religious belief that they had. All right. So they put tremendous amount of faith in this rolling the die thing. And I kept trying to figure out, the way the text reads, did they not seem like they rolled the dice numerous times until it hit some time? So was they looking for a particular time? It kind of reads, but when I read a commentary on the thing, it lets on like they only did it once. But when I read it, I got the feeling that it seemed like they rolled it every month until they got the number they wanted. And that's the way it read to me, and I kind of tried to figure that out, but I couldn't never get that in the right category in my head. So y'all figure it out and tell me next week. But, that situation there is sort of funny. They cast in the lots. And we got this picture then. They're rolling the dice, and they come up with this date. And that was the way a lot of decisions were held and done. Y'all, can you name one or two for an old man here?
Well, you
right? And how did they pick Matthias? They rolled the dice. Did they not? That's how they picked Matthias. So even in the Christian age and the replacement of Matthias, they rolled the die there. And did they not roll the die and deciding if it was going to be Judas? Replacing Judas. They did that. And how about then when they chunked Jonah out the boat? They rolled the dice to decide which one of you guys is going swimming with the fish, and it ended up, Jonah won that trick. They rolled the dice on him. So rolling the dice, that was used to make a lot of decisions. And then you read Proverbs 16:33. One of y'all can read that. I don't want to turn over there. I know what it says. I know if you get the wrong verse. Bill, you got Proverbs 16:33 over there? No. You got to look in that big, thick book. Whoever gets to it first, read it. Proverbs 16:33. And then when you get there and you read it, and I'll know if I said the right verse.
The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord.
Okay. So we roll them dice, and who's going to tell us who's the winner? The Lord might be the one doing this, right? So here we got the dice throwing going on. So they roll the dice, and the Lord can intervene. Now we're talking about providence. We've been studying about providence in this book, have we not? You think the Lord was controlling this dice roll? Do you think the Lord controlled the dice roll of Matthias? Do you think he controlled the dice throw of Jonah? He knew what his plan was. He used these decisions, this situation, to make those die fall where they needed to fall. Did you not? Do you not see his hand in this? Shake your head, because it's there. It's there. That's what he did. This is how his providence showed in this story. You don't see his name anywhere, but his hand is everywhere. Everywhere. This all in his providence, that this whole story happens. So we get the rolling of the dice. Haman's gone in there, and boy, I love this spiel here. He would make a great lawyer. Because he can tell the truth, he can tell a half lie, and he can tell a full lie, and smile the whole time. Because he's talking to the king, and he's saying, these people are spread out all through your kingdom. That's the truth. Is it not? That's the truth part of it. Then what's the next thing he says about them? Their laws are different. That's half true. Because they do have some laws that's different. But they had been allowed to practice their religion, had they not? They'd been granted that permission. So their laws are a little different. Then the last one, what did he say? What's the third thing?
They don't obey.
They don't, and that's a lie. That's the lie. So there you have the truth, the half-truth, and the lie, and he's told them all with a smiling face. And the king has said, boy, you're right on. You're right on. Here, take my ring, stamp it, send the letter out to all these by Pony Express, and get the news out. And he's done rolled the dice. He's done set the date that we're going to wipe them out. He's got his whole plan in action. But then he's going to pay for it, right?
I think that's all the king heard. When he heard the big money, he said, do whatever
When he says, I'm bringing you 3 Mack dump trucks full of silver down here, and I'll dump it wherever you want it dumped. If you got some kin folks down here that you need to pay off or whatever you need to do, I'll take this silver wherever you want it to go to put in the king's treasury is the word, right? It didn't say the treasury, it just said it could go the treasuries. It has an S on the end of it. So that made me think this could go anywhere really he wanted to go, because he's the king. He can do what he wants to with it. This represents, by the way, 2/3 or 3/4 of the empire's annual revenue. That's how much this is. And that brings me back to, where did this clown get all this silver? He's got to be involved in something. He's got to be. Am I a conspiracy theorist? Yes. Them planes flying over that white smoke, that's the government trying to kill us. You know, I'm into this stuff. No, that's my brother. But you know, that's what is happening here. I believe this guy's got his hands in the cookie jar. He's got all this money, and he's going to use it, if he needs to bribe the king to kill all these people. Well, the king says, well, do with it whatever you want to. There's 2 or 3 examples in the New Testament where that same, and Mel can tell you them words, them Greek words and Hebrew words that means these things, that this is the same term as used in others. It's a term that means you could say that, but you may not necessarily mean that. It's kind of like you just do whatever you want to with it. Might mean you can do whatever you want to with it as long as it's what I want you to do with it, kind of. Or it could mean you can just do whatever. A lot of the commentators want to think that King Ahasuerus did not just chunk this to let him have it. He believes, most commentators believe that he directed these funds to go wherever he may have wanted them to go, is the consensus of, and I read 2 or 3 commentaries on it, but it appears that that's what really happened to this money thing, is that it got done that way. This little event, casting the lots, is now the second most reverent day of the Jewish religion, next to Day of Atonement. Purim, P-U-R-I-M, they celebrate. And every year they read the book of Esther in the morning, the book of Esther in the afternoons. And they rejoice and feast because this proves to them that they are God's chosen people. The end. Act number 3 will be next week, and I don't even know who's teaching. Do you remember? I got it in my book, but I had to walk over.
I was just thinking about, let me look for it.
Jason Dyer will be the presenter.
Both of these were the king and Haman. All of this had to do with bruised egos, right?
Yep.
And the late Dr. Ward, we're commenting about that. He was quoting somebody else, but he said that they were both little men. And he said, and he was quoting somebody as saying, when little men cast a long shadow, you can be sure the sun is setting.
That's good, isn't it? Yeah, that puts it right into perspective right there. That's it. The little men, and they cast a bad, dark shadow. They did. I appreciate your participation, patience, or whatever it took to get through it, but we made it.